Hi, iPhone. How you been? Oh, there you are, iPhone. You have
I can't. It's hard to change the name, so I just gave up. But I did try for like a whole minute.
it's super funny. Super funny. So it's holiday today. We kind of forgot, didn't we?
I didn't, but
Yeah,
uh,
you don't look like you're in the office right now.
no, I'm not. No, I am on holiday.
Very good. I'm just going to send you something here. That's why I look a bit distracted. Um, yeah, so yeah, where are you?
A random tiny village in Belgium. Extremely boring, so that I hope that's what makes it nice.
Yeah, that's what makes it a holiday. Just going to open this window here. I think Andrea's joining in an hour, maybe.
Okay, nice.
I wasn't sure which time zone she was referring to. I know Mark Anderson cannot join us, but I'm going to show you something here. Okay, I know you're on a screen, so it's a bit small, but
Yeah.
can you see some of this?
Yes. Table of content.
Yeah. So what I did was I tried to take all our work. So this is supposed to have future of text 1, 2, 3, special sessions, and everything.
Hmm.
It's kind of an overview. And the first thing I did was do AI summaries.
Yeah.
And the AI summaries are actually very good, but they're not the original voice, and it is a summary. So then I did AI bullet points, which are also very good. But again, as my friend last night said, it doesn't have a story. So
Hmm.
I argued with Mark Anderson on the phone yesterday. He was going on and on about human in the loop and all kinds of things, and AI just doing this and that. But check out, this is what I did in the end. Let's just go a little bit in. So the first bit is the first sentence or paragraph from the contributor's own writing.
Hmm.
The last bit is the last sentence or paragraph. So these
Yeah.
are both written by the author.
Hmm.
The middle one is bullet point AI generated.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too much of an overlap. So this has a lot to do with arguing with Mark, and it has a lot to do with you and the testing we did for table of contents, what should be shown.
Hmm.
So it is much more readable. I've done quite a few. I've been a bit bored. I'm in Norway now with my mom. So you can, other than a few I have to edit because I went over a page and I forgot to do a page break. It's not so bad at all. You can, because the thing Chris Guttridge said a few years ago when I started my PhD work is if you read the abstracts of a piece, the last sentence tend to say what it really is. So that kind of inspired this because when someone writes an article, they're going to start clear and they're going to end with this is the bit that I really need you to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they're going to write all kinds of horrible filler in the middle. So I think in a way the AI gets rid of the filler, to be frank. But okay, you have to look at the screen now because this is the best bit. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So David Johnson in brackets, it's a citation 41. Click on it, and then we get the title and stuff, and you click on that. It opens the original document to the
Hmm.
right page instantly. Yeah, it's awesome. Even my mother, who was not interested in this, saw this, and when she saw that, was wow. So you can see here, this rolling PDF, as I call it, because we'll keep adding to it, is
Hmm.
941 kilobytes. And it doesn't, because it doesn't have any images in it whatsoever. So the idea is to just keep updating it. once we get a structure for it, and also, sorry, because one thing that became really clear by integrating AI in Reader and Author is that at this point, AI is much better for an author than a reader because it's slow. You know, you're not going to wait 10 seconds for a summary to load when you have the article in front of you. But if an editor does it on your behalf, puts it somewhere useful, then maybe.
Is it possible right now to so if I understood correctly, you have first and last line as quotes from the original text.
Yes.
The title is a link to the original text, and then in the middle you have a certain amount of bullet points that is generated based on the text.
Yes, with editorial oversight, correct.
And the number of bullet points is fixed, or is it the length or something else?
The whole thing needs to fit on one page. That's the only criteria.
Okay. Is it a criteria that you gave as a constraint to the AI, or is it?
I gave it to myself because some of the articles have more bullet points than that, and then I just have to delete. Because we talked the other week about what is the ideal size for an article, and I think it's probably a 13-inch screen or half of it to get one point across, and then of course access to more.
But I'm wondering how is it possible, right? Go on a bullet point. I mean, you have at least two conclusions. One is, okay, I knew all this, all that is interesting, but not to the point of me digging deeper. Or I disagree, maybe I misunderstood, or it's brilliant, but I need to dig actually to see if it's more than the bullet point. So basically, is it possible, if the article, the source of matter, you read it all, but if, for example, you're summarizing a 50-page article, even if you do find one of the bullet point interesting, you don't want to read the whole thing again. So is it possible to go back to the specific point where that summarization came from?
So that's a really good question, and I will answer it in two different things. One, this is not designed for that. This is designed as only for our own work. Where people are supposed to write maybe 2 pages, some go a bit longer. But I have had a few people who go a few pages, and then I've had to make decisions. Should I summarize per page, or should I not summarize, bullet point per page, bullet point, the whole thing? So I think what is probably a good idea in a longer article is to do the bullet points per page and give each one of those a link to the original article, because then they will at least open up to that right page.
Yeah. If it's indeed done in index, let's say, on a predictable manner, then going back shouldn't be a problem. So I'm asking because what was it, yesterday or 2 days ago? I went to discuss with a researcher from the Sorbonne University. She's working on her doctorate is on documenting Fab Lab. I don't know if you've been. It's like places with 3D printers, laser cutters, and all this. And they build stuff. It's pretty interesting, but it's also pretty complex. Like if you never use a 3D printer, yeah, it can be overwhelming. So basically, her thesis is about annotating it live. So you have cameras around the tool, and then you record steps of it, and then the next person, or even yourself, when you come back to that complex tool, you can use it more efficiently. With that discussion with her, I also thought about summarizing per part, either page or paragraph or 50 pages or whatnot. But I was pretty convinced that the navigation of it, how you can go to the very short as you demonstrated, but then also be able to expand back. That navigation itself, I think, is very valuable. Because otherwise, if you're stuck with the certain level of description, and it's, if you're lucky, that's just the right one, but most likely at some point you will want to switch back to either shorter or larger or more expanded.
So Brandel, you also didn't get the memo that today is a holiday, huh?
Oh,
Look
in
at
the
your
UK,
face.
yes.
Look at your face.
I was waiting to unmute. I did know that there was a holiday in the UK.
You still look funny.
I haven't been. I was staying up all night reading about brains.
Oh, good. Fabian, if you don't mind, I'll show Brandel the same thing.
Go for it.
So I've had an issue, Brandel, with the work that we put together, our record. Getting
Uh-huh.
someone to read it is really hard. And of
Uh-huh.
course, over the last few years, we've discussed all kinds of principles, like just like Fabian was talking about, being able to have less or more information and so on. So what I've done is created a new thing that currently is called a rolling journal. So it's a freestanding document, but it has summaries of what is in all the articles. I've only done about half of the ones in volume 1, but let me show you the logic. So let's see. Okay, we will do, yeah, this is fine. So the first bit up here is a quote. It's the first sentence from the article. Because we did this exercise with Fabienne a while ago. I don't know if you remember, for VR, where we put all the first pages of articles on the wall. And there was a lot of things that came out of that. And one of them is, if you can see the beginning of what someone's writing, unless they're writing really, really badly, it does have the human, it has the authenticity, and it tends to be relatively clear.
Yeah.
This is the last sentence from their piece. The middle bit here is AI bullet points.
Cool.
So yeah, it's cool. Thank you. So it becomes readable now because it's more skimmable. Of course, going from article to article, you still have to stop for each. So there are still steps of inventing the future of text we need to deal with. But the really cool thing, are you ready for this? Yeah, good. Okay, you're sitting down. So this is a new document. It's 900K or something like this, and no images. All it is have these types of summaries. If I now click, see after Bernard's name, it has hard brackets 21. That means it's a citation, as we've seen. If I now, and by the way, the thing in quotes here is the original article's heading, which I don't use because most of them are just future of text or something irrelevant, but it's here. Anyway, if I now click on the name of the original document, which is the future of text, it opens it to the cited page.
Fantastic.
So as long as thank you, as long as let me just go to where I explain it to people. As long as the reader has, oh God, here is Peter. Great, I'll get to do this demo again. Okay, Peter, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I was running a few minutes late.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm grateful that you're here at all today. So as I've gone through with Fabienne and a little bit now with Brandel, just want to explain what this document is. This document is called a rolling journal. It's a 900K freestanding document that is supposed to summarize everything, all the articles in the future text community over all the years. It makes two assumptions. Number one, that all the previous PDFs have been downloaded. There are download links here. This is a page that would get continuously updated, hence rolling. So as long as the user has done that, and as long as the user is using Reader, then what happens is, let's say they're reading here by, actually, you know what? No. Okay, so they're reading this Christian book. So the first paragraph is the first paragraph of their article. So it's either a first sentence or first paragraph. It really depends what's relevant, right? The last one is the last sentence or paragraph from their piece. And in the middle, all these bullet points are the main points as AI has determined and as me, as editor, has approved or edited, right?
Very nice.
Thank you. So as you go through, so Andy wrote, the most powerful books reach beyond their pages, la, 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 la. It gives you an idea. And then bang, bang, bang. And then the ending with, of course, spaced repetition is just one approach. You know, it's a nice conclusion. But here's the really key thing. because this makes the explicit assumption that you've already downloaded the sources, if you now click on the 12 after Andy and Michael, and you see here, this bit is the title. If you click on the Future of Text, Volume 1, it opens that to the page where that citation, where that article was.
Brilliant.
I'm glad you like it. I'm glad it's, dog fooding or whatever. It is an example where with our own content, we can do this, but it has to be real content. When you're doing information stuff and it's just a few things, it so easily gets CD-ROM demo kind of nonsense. So here we can massage this again and again. I haven't done the whole thing. I expect in dialogue with you guys, we'll realize some improvements. But at least it's now interactable. I'll email it to you later today.
One thing that could be done also in terms of dog fooding is doing this, so this kind of processes. And I would suggest to, if you want, have it on the blog, the different. Regardless of how it's done, let's say either using ChatGPT or BERT or whatever model. But I think that step, let's say going from a piece of text to the bullet point or summarization or whatnot, this kind of request or prompting, I guess, to make them available to each other. And because I think, for example, this kind of thing would work also here. Let's say the recording of this video, and we can indeed keep it rolling. Like for every video, we can have the captions, but from the captions, we can have the bullet point. And then we can try to detect, are we changing the topic? Let's say the first half an hour is dedicated to this many topics, the second is not, and then let's say chunk it. And if we can keep on, as you say, keeping it rolling, I think that could give interesting results. But then, yeah, learning from each other in terms of prompting for knowledge work, regardless of the source being either PDF or video or whatnot. I think that could be pretty useful.
On the topic of what we're doing now, the gulf between spoken language and written language is so, I have to say it this way, fucking huge that the twain shall never meet correctly. And of course, that is our key challenge. So what I have done with the AI and academia thing we had recently is playing around with formatting. I had a meeting with Valentina a few days after our big session together where this happened. So you see here, there's two different things. And also this is really difficult to reconcile in terms of style. There are 3 articles that people submitted before the session, which probably should be completely away from this. It's getting very muddy. But then on the transcript, what I tried to do is determine what sessions were really lightning pitches. We didn't explicitly say that. We should probably do that in the future. So anytime, let's say Alan is talking here, okay, let's just click on that. So the first bit that Alan said, I've made it heading level 5. Just so that it shows up in full here in the overview, right? And then it's normal size. So the idea is that's an AI summary. So everything he is saying here has been moved up here. So if we go back to the summary, the table of contents, it looks like this. So Peter Wasilko, page 66. AI systems can provide useful summarization. So you should be able to read the whole thing here, just in the table of contents. Except for the issue of where there are small interjections. Because why in the world would I write, Frode says, yes, Fabian, go ahead. That's useless information. So there's a bit of editorializing. So let me click on Peter. So here you see, he's got a couple of pages of presentation. So I did the summary here and AI generated bullet points here of his bits. So what I think,
You got the perfect screen capture there too. Wonderful.
Yeah, no, I'm glad. I don't do many, but I think what you were doing there really need to be showed. So I think, Fabian, the questions you're asking, for us to actually experiment with what should be summarized and where? Should it be in the document itself? Should there be an overview document? How do you go in and out? Do you do bullets or do you do summarization? Do you do editing? Do you do chopping? It's really getting to be important. And I think the thing you said there, let me say it back to you, see if I understood you. Speaking something that has semantic value for the writing later. Something along the lines of, I will now do my lightning talk. Or even saying clearly, I disagree with the previous point. Is that what you mean? Trying to be a bit more explicit, so when we do a transcript, it's easier to connect things, or what?
Not even, but for sure that would be helpful. Like indeed, there are a lot of implicit things that are not captionable, or so we can be explicit, which might be a little bit awkward. But what I'm saying is there are a couple of if we all start to tinker with prompts on either summarization, bullet point, etc., those prompts are precious. Like how you're going to tell to the AI system, this is the input text, this is the output text, and I want it formatted in JSON, PDF, HTML, just text, raw text. I want 1 bullet point, 10, I want 1 per page, etc. I think all that is precious, and I think we should learn from each other on that, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to reinvent anything, but if there are, for example, a couple of websites on prompting, mostly for image generation, where people share, oh, I've got this beautiful photo or image, and the prompt for this is that. And I think we can do the same for knowledge work, let's say, because it's not so trivial to get the right prompt. But I think it can be useful, but still, making explicit the things we do say, even despite the gap, let's say, between the written text and audio and conversation like this, with all the change of speakers, pace, all that. I think it would still be interesting to explore.
I absolutely agree with you. And in doing the bullet points, I've been really experimenting with the prompting, because I have AI both in Reader and Liquid now, which works slightly differently. But the point is, even if I say no bullet points or no numbers, it quite often ignores it. It's a bit random, which I think is hugely interesting. We're dealing with a different kind of intelligence, not competition to human intelligence, but it is very different. It's like trying to figure this creature out. The other thing is, because of the difference between speech and writing, I really think we need to reinvent a way for all of you to write more. And the 3 of you here have all written in the work. So when I say all of you, I mean including people who aren't here. Maybe we can find a way to write within this system that is more like sending a tweet. Look at Adam Wern. He refuses to write, but then he puts really good tweets in the chat community. How can we possibly, help him, and also Alan Laidlaw? Because it's ridiculous to have them say really wise things, but then also they don't want to go and edit them. They are case studies, so I'm not complaining about them, and they are representing really brilliant people that maybe we can make systems to help. I mean, the thing about the rolling overview, it's kind of an annotation. So I could imagine that the transcripts, because for 2 transcripts now, I just paid $250 to have them done. I can't afford to do that, right? But this is done really properly. Someone who spends the time, not just AI, making sure that the right terminology and all of that. So that's good. But maybe if we do a kind of a rolling journal like this, what we can do is have the transcript as a more rough document, and then we go through, and the bits we want to pull out, we polish more, and we make it really clear where we have the repositories for the originals for the community for a while. So if someone says, hey, I didn't want you to highlight that, or something else, that can be dealt with. Yeah, Fabien.
I would so I have not. Did I actually? I don't think I ever did pay for transcript because it's not something I've needed a lot. I did start to tinker more those last weeks with automatic transcription. And the result was actually, beside my own name that was misspelled, was actually pretty good. So I'm not saying this is necessarily the way, but what I would tend to think is combining both, let's say, prompt, where you have some rules that are not necessarily easy to describe in what's usually like natural language processing or regular expression or this kind of things, but large or complex text manipulation on top of a transcription that will be done automatically that we know will not be reliable. And one of the things that I liked, I tried Whisper.cpp like a week ago, is what it was giving transcription, yes, and relatively okay, but it was also giving a degree of confidence. And for example, my name was a mess, and it was confident that it would be a mess. And I think if we can combine both a transcription that we know is mostly reliable yet not perfect with a couple of rules, again, like knowledge work prompts, maybe we can have, again, maybe it's not sufficient, but I think the process itself could be interesting. Why I'm a little bit more optimistic about this kind of tools is because I see more and more that are about on par with OpenAI and GPT-4. It might require a tiny bit more work, but it means having about the same type of result without being stuck in a black box. That doesn't mean nobody should use OpenAI tools, but what I'm saying is what was for me until now something I pushed back in terms of exploration because of the, let's say, moral or ethical, my own framework, let's say. Now I think it's acceptable with alternatives. And thus I think trying to rely on that, combining prompt to fix transcription is interesting, especially in our use case, because we do provide, at least I hope, interesting content, but for sure a volume that is quite, it is demanding. So if we can find the tool to still do more, say more, but make it actionable, and eventually in the end that it's not just text, but something computational, to me that would be something interesting to explore.
The biggest problem I have with the AI transcripts is not the words. They're generally quite good, and it's also not all the ahs, and repetitions. It's actually assigning who was speaking. So I use the Sonics.ai, and once you've assigned one person, it works, but for some reason, in our community, a few people get mixed up. So I have to go through 2 hours of, Peter was Ilka, okay, next one, Fabian, oh, no, that was actually, oh my God, if that one is sorted, that will be such a huge step.
But then maybe there is something dedicated to this that is not related to transcription, but it's really just assigning the speaker based on something completely unrelated, like the tone or the pitch, or I don't know, something much more basic that would work and that we're not aware of. And otherwise also, and this is maybe a bit naive of me, but if that's a huge amount of work, maybe there is a kind of wiki way to do it where people would, like the result before it's published anywhere, let's say in a future text volume, as a kind of transcript or somewhere else, I don't know. People would have once again a last chance to try to fix it, but it would be a system that make it as simple as a push of a button. It's something that happens for the open source conference FOSDEM, like they record everything, all the video of all the talks, and then at the end, the next day, or maybe even a couple of hours after your talk, they give you a link, you follow the link, and then they give you a couple of audio tracks, and 5 minutes before, 5 minutes after, they make the best guess. I don't know how it works, but it's pretty good of when your talk starts, when it finishes, and then you as the speaker adjust it. So maybe something like this, because if that's the bottleneck, it would be a shame that it blocks all the interesting exploration we could do, because it's pushed on you basically.
Yeah,
Does
that's
yours,
definitely a key one.
does your Zoom subscription allow for audio transcription for cloud recordings?
Well, I have have some of the apps here. I've tried to use some of them. The Fathom, and I think
But specifically Zoom is in a advantageous position, if nothing else, to then to determine the specific speaker. So if nothing else is relevant, I pasted a link into the chat. If nothing other than the speaker is relevant from that cloud recording, accessible via the BTT file, the voice to text, I guess, or video. Yeah. Anyway, video text transcription.
Yeah, I mean,
Then-
the problem is the cloud recording quickly runs out of space. I record locally, and
I see. Okay.
so yeah, like right now, I've used it's 1.62 gigabytes used, and I don't even know what's on there. It wasn't much. So let me just log in and see how I access it, because what you sent there is very interesting.
If you're able
actually-
somehow to do both. Sorry, go ahead, Fabian.
It would be here. I'm on the phone, but if I was on the desktop or web client, then I'm pretty sure, as we discussed like 3 or 6 months ago, the speaker is probably like a class, a CSS class, and then if there is a name, or at least we know we switch from one speaker to another, and roughly the timing, then we can align this with the transcript, and that we would be very confident about that.
Yeah, I did something using Windows Get User Media from with it not in Zoom, but actually having a web page read the speaker, read the participants list to identify where the microphone was, and that would be reasonably accurate. But if there's anything coming through the web interface, then you're right. I've only ever used the native app, but the web interface has an opportunity that's right for the injection, because it is likely that the audio track is coming over as a single channel by the time it hits a given client. But the class changes on the participants lists in the web view would be one of the most easy things to identify. How do you get to the web?
They do their best
I've
when
done-
you join the meeting. The UX is trying to pull you away from the web, but if you click on the link to join the meeting on the browser, I think you do like download client or something like this, and then at some point it's like, oh, you seem to be trying to give up, try to join via the web instead. But the normal URL can lead to the web client, but you need to
Cool, okay,
refuse the native one.
Yeah, all right. Well, I will give that a try, and we can take a look at what sort of information is accessible via the DOM there, because that would be really, really interesting in terms of being able to pull some of the stuff down. You might even be able to intercept and build a bookmarklet of some kind, because then you'd be able to intercept other information, possibly like once you have the time codes of speakers, then you have things like the relative balance of speakers, the order in which the speaking typically occurs. You'd also have the ability to identify, if you wanted to, if it was relevant, who was muted and who wasn't at different times, and be able to create a score of all of those things. But also, if you have the ability to intercept indicators of volume or obtain the volume over that time, then you'd be able to figure out the likely cadence of speech based on the modulation of volume. And so if you hear long pauses, then you realize that it's just somebody who hasn't thought of the next word. So yeah, that would be really interesting to play with.
Yeah, this is very interesting. And this is one of those, like the Economist jokes. Two guys walking down the street, there's a $20 bill on the pavement. One says, look at the $20 bill. And the other one says, it can't be there, because if it was, someone would have picked it up already. It's the same with transcripts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a clean transcript system for a group doesn't seem to exist yet. Every few months I go searching for one. But so here's the thing, two sides of this. Number one, me as the editor generally of our written stuff, I sometimes have to make editorial decisions, which I Would rather not. I'd rather the community does it. Anyway, I have to. Maybe as a host for the meetings, so to speak, I should also do some of the audio bits like, this is important. Now the word important is in there, and it's not that big a deal. But just, all of us try to remember, but, whoever hosts the meeting has a responsibility to use those words. And then also, on the other side, it would, of course, be very useful if the transcription, every block has a time code, because then you can instantly merge it with the chat, which is useful. Not just when there's a URL sent, but someone may very well type, oh, this point happening now is really useful. And that'll be clearly typed. So I do think we should consider a system where all participants have their own microphones. And if we can do it web-based, see, here's the thing, that should then also relatively easily work in a VR environment, right? When we get to that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things that I've often thought about is the necessity for positionality within sound, and certainly like with the web and anybody with AirPods, anything like that, all of those things should be able to be rendered spatially such that we have the positional thing, the positional relevance of somebody's pose, able to modulate relative volumes and locate people in space. And I'm convinced that that could get good enough to the point where two people could actually, where multiple conversations could be carried on in a single Zoom room at once. And it would be potentially confusing for somebody without these benefits, but being able to kind of move their head would allow them to tune in or tune out various pieces of it and understand one conversation to be sort of at the periphery while the other one is the one they're centrally attending to. That doesn't do much for text because text is also implicitly centrally focused. And so you'd have to either consider de-interleaving them. Yeah, exactly. You'd need to have parallel tracks of text, but it would be fascinating to kind of identify that. You don't need to have meta information about which other participants were implicitly attending to, but
So two things on that. Number one, Fabian and Mark and I, when I was in Japan, we did a brief Horizons workroom, and the spatial audio there is absolutely perfect, except for this magic you're talking about, which is really a brilliant idea on top of that. So that works really well. Now, going in the opposite direction is the issue of speech still isn't writing. So what I would really, really like is if, because, okay, I'm changing my sentence there too. I didn't even do it on show, but it happened, right? The articles that I'm now summarizing in this way, there is a beginning, middle, and an end. When we do a proper lightning talk or someone speaks at length, like all of us today are actually not interjecting so much, it's a little bit better. It's more summarizable. But what might be really, really good is if people, let's say Alan, great example, right? He gets excited by something, he goes off and he writes a bit, but he can weave it back into this. So if we have the notion of this rolling journal, Alan may contribute a piece and saying, I was talking on Monday about this stuff, here's the bit that I wrote about it. And instead of it just being a web link, it's properly put in. So that, because so many of the great things that we've said it in the most mumbled, horrible ways. The author should have a chance to go back and make it better. Fabian. Sorry, iPhone.
Yes, iPhone speaking again. So yeah, I actually wanted to mention the meta whatever example, because at some point we also need to consider, is Zoom itself the problem? It works, and the process of sending it to YouTube after also works, but it limits us precisely because it does work, so we just stick to it. And I think what we tried I think it's Workroom or Horizon or whatever, was good because we did try something else. Like, we left the normal comfort of the Zoom call. It wasn't better on all aspects, but still interesting. And I mentioned this also because I basically did a pipeline workflow where I take videos from my video server. It's not YouTube, it's PureTube, and I transcribe it, and then I upload the VTT files through the API. And basically, with one command line, I have subtitles added to my video with the right timing. Not perfect, but it works. And it's because I have the control over everything. And I'm wondering, and that was honestly surprising to me. I did not think it would either work or be that convenient. I know that, for example, PureTube can do also live, so it could be possible to do a live presentation. I know that it's possible to pipe in PureTube Jitsi, so I think it would be possible to have a call that we then transform to a live presentation that anybody else could just watch if they want, not to join but just watch, and have the transcription. And also I did a short course, like 1 hour and a half, on prompting using ChatGPT 2 days ago. That's why I was talking about knowledge prompt and this kind of things. And I think we can basically put all that together, basically have live transcription and summarization or bullet points all in one. We could do it with Zoom and, let's say, the CSS class and some hacks here or there. But at some point, we need to wonder, are we spending more time reverse engineering something that is okay and yet not that special, versus doing something super weird that we might just use once and then give up, but hopefully learn something in the process? I would tend to think we can do both. Let's say keep Zoom and YouTube and the human-made transcription for, let's say, the baseline, and then once a month, for example, we try something a bit crazy, which is like all the ideas we mentioned there and more. Just give it a go in a meeting, live, or that it would be for the next one. But I think none of the things we said today made me think, oh, this is not something we could implement and have running during, let's say, a live call and ourselves.
Yeah, I agree. I would also add that, so that seems like a really useful thing to do, and one doesn't even need to have a real thing working. One can just pretend that all of the data is immediately accessible and that one has total control over a tool in order to design and sketch out concretely what the best solution might look like in terms of either a tool or an instrument for constructing, or even just the resulting hyperdocument at the other end. So being able to sort of, knowing what we know about Zoom and Zoom-like or video chat-like sort of things, try to understand what kinds of artifacts we could come away with and what sort of values they might be able to have. Thinking of the different kind of components, like what is visible on people's screens at different moments, as well as what was said, as well as what might have been up on their share screens, as well as their videos. And yeah, I think that it would be a really valid exercise to just sketch out the style of that content as though we had all of the pieces for it, for the purposes of pursuing different components, as Fabian is suggesting, for trial and experimentation. I mean, the downside of it is that if it's not independently controlled and recorded, then you run the risk of losing some stuff while you're doing it. But what you gain is the ability to check whether it serves your needs, and that's worth taking a risk on.
Yeah, and then I agree with I agree with everything there. But let me just go in the opposite direction for a minute and say, what about, for the sake of argument, we choose not to record anything, but force people to write something? You know,
can we force them to write also code and not just text?
Okay, I think that's absolutely a worthwhile provocation. I would say we have to define what you mean by that, because pseudocode, right, is useful. Does that fit in what you're talking about?
Ideally, it would be something that does the thing it says, compilable or runnable or executable. I think that just because it's not okay, it is a provocation in the sense that, for example, you do want written text with a certain format that some people struggle with, but you know that it is worthwhile. And I would argue that having a piece of software that does what it says it does, not just the description, is in most cases useful. It's not necessarily worth it because maybe it's crazy amount of resource needed. Maybe it's also a shitty idea and it's definitely not worth it. Maybe it's even a dangerous one. But usually, I mean, if it's a good idea, you want it to be usable, executable, that it does something. So I would, yes, pseudocode would be better than just the textual description. But ideally, I would say something that is runnable, executable, that others can also try would be best. I'm not saying it's easy or trivial or even feasible, but ideally, I think that could be the most interesting.
So one thing that you and Andrea and I have been emailing about is on the 12th of May to have a demo day. I think we need to, there aren't that many people here. There's only 2 guys, but that's good. Agree if that's a good day, and also
Have a good day.
that's a good day. Oh, okay, Brandel, what do you think?
The 12th. So I won't be able to
My
make it
calendar
personally,
now.
but
Sorry, what did you say, Brandel? You said yes, right, Peter?
Okay.
Yes, it's a good day.
And it's not a good day for Brandel, is that right?
I said I wouldn't be able to make it in person.
Okay. Oh, you're sending an
um,
avatar. We get to experience the new Apple avatars. This is great.
Yeah, no, I could do that. The Friday the 12th. Yep.
So, okay, that's great. So the idea, in person. Okay, sorry, I was being really stupid. So the reason I mention it now is the thing that I showed you with this rolling journal is me doing. And on the demo day is about doing. There are many different ways to do. I don't code, but I've been spending the morning copying and pasting and formatting and all of that nonsense, right? So what I think you're talking about, Fabian, is that people should ideally submit something that is actionable and interactive, right? One of the things we have, of course, is the notion of a glossary. Maybe we could expand the glossary to each glossary term. If it's not done by the editor, we can see which author wrote the glossary term. Because if I would like to kindly try to force people to write shorter articles for the book next time, but they will be allowed to have appendices. So if they want to write hugely intricate descriptions of something, fine, stick it in the back and link to it. That's absolutely not a problem. But if they want to write a glossary thing, like some people have done, it's just a nothing burger. It doesn't connect. But if it's within the ecosystem of a defined thing, then it can be extracted and used. So I'm wondering what other ways we can write something that is as clear and structured as code without necessarily having to be code.
Mm-hmm. Can I go off on it sounds like more of a tangent than it is. I read my daughter, not Fahrenheit 451, but the plot synopsis of Fahrenheit 451, and sort of explained any of the pieces that I needed to along the way in order for her to understand what it was, because it was just mentioned in Rainbow's End, which is the one about augmented reality.
I'm reading it.
And it's great. It's a good book. I've had it recommended to me by people in various workplaces. And Fahrenheit 451, obviously, it's old enough that hopefully it's not a spoiler to give away the ending, not the ending, but the main conceit at the end is that people are books, that people sort of take on the job of representing a work that they like the most. And one of the things that's that's very avant-garde and in some senses silly, but it's also really interesting in that it changes the idea of a book as a static artifact into something that is intrinsically performative and performed. It in the same way that I was doing the summarization to my daughter, and that I was reaching from a summarization in order to be able to explain it. When you know something and you have all of the information and all of the different media and different forms, distillations ready to hand, you have the ability to perform the informing the information of that source in a way where you have a palette of tools to reach for in order to be able to give that content to somebody, so that they have the best understanding and that you have the best representation of those things at those times. And I'm really interested in the idea, not necessarily of creating a static book or even a static program, but potentially like I said, like this palette of capabilities for an informer to do the information of some other party with this kind of suite. So if you thought of the future of text, not like if you thought of this rolling summary throughout not as a book, but as an instrument panel for you, as an instrument that you have the ability to perform with in order to reach all of the parts and transpose them with input from you into different forms, then that could be a really interesting thing to do, because it becomes an information instrument, something that you push on different paddles, you pull different things out, and you may have to do a little bit of reformulation. Coding per se is a more sort of it's a sort of an intermediate action between playing and constructing such an instrument. It's sort of blurring those lines, but with an intentionally enough performed, a constructed sort of tool, a carefully constructed instrument, then that is a pretty gray area, and when people play with a horn or a trumpet and they attach or detach a muffle and the various things that people can do on the fly to a drum kit, then that's some intermediary sort of form between merely playing and constructing an instrument. But I think that it's a really interesting goal to have something that, like, ideally it would be great for somebody to be able to get everything they could possibly get out of Future of Text without your benefit. But it's also really interesting to think about, like, what is the best story? What is the best result of a conversation with you, with the best possible representation of this corpus of knowledge at your fingertips specifically, not at one person's, but at yours, for discursive and explanatory sort of purposes? What does that look like? It's a really exciting vision.
Something got stuck in my hair, sorry. Yeah,
I'm sorry too.
the summary thing that I've been doing now has made me read the book again, but in a much better way. And there are some reflections on what you're talking about now, the performative aspects and instrument for sure. Not only Alan Kay, but more. So I think that's really, really, really important. Let me just show you a brief thing. That old joke, I didn't have enough time to write a short message, right? Look at this. This guy, Jesse here, it's so short, right? To get people to write something that short is a real challenge. I know I'm talking about something very different, but the thing is, we talk about different time scales because performative is very different from skimming through. And I think the biggest problem text has, I think maybe Brandel, you were highlighting this in the early days of our VR discussions, is really terrible for overviews. Really, really terrible. Text has to be appreciated linearly in time, at least, even if you have a graph in front of you. So I think that, I'm now still doing my corrections, and I went through another phase of finding out how people define metadata, just to make sure that that's clearly done, because it isn't clearly done. But there were some interesting perspectives that came up. One of them was clearly structured. Metadata has to be structured. Otherwise, it's not metadata. It's a dump of stuff, kind of. And also that metadata is someone's perspective that two things are linked. It makes it very human. This is the author's name. That is someone's perspective. It may be wrong, even if it's in the original document. Point being, the kind of things you're talking about to build the opportunities to turn it into an instrument for interrogation and presentation, it's probably very, very similar to what you would need to be able to do overviews and skimming and moving around on different levels. So to try to enrich it in this way is important. Sorry, that was a long way of saying yes.
No, it's really interesting in the context of what kinds of pieces of information ought to get kind of included. It's interesting that somebody would say that metadata has to be structured. I mean, sort of like trivially, I think metadata is just stuff around something, and in the sense that it's understood to be around something, then it needs to be relevant. But like metadata about this conversation is the sort of provenance of all of the articles of furniture that you have in your room behind you, and maybe the people who would assert that needs to be structured would be having a narrower view that, I'm not going to say it's useless, because obviously like you don't want to boil the ocean on what information sort of exists, but it's obviously, if that is the case, then it's a reduction of the sort of the broadest possible scope that somebody could understand metadata within, and to do so with some utility, moreover. So it's not merely that I'm being obtuse, which I'm, reserving the right to do, obviously, but also that that defining metadata that broadly serves a functional purpose that we gain some benefit from. So, yeah.
I see your hand, Fabian, but can I just reflect on that real quick? Okay, thank you. Thanks. I saw you nodding. So in my introduction on metadata, I say that there is argument for what is and what isn't metadata, but in competition with reference managers, which Visual Meta isn't really, but my examiners have kind of said that I've set that up, which is debate. Visual Meta is supposed to augment reference managers, not fight against them. But one of the things a reference manager cannot do is put more stuff in the reference section than what the current reference citation styles demand. Right. So, for instance, in Visual Meta, you can say who wrote the section, but you cannot put that in a normal document. So, is that metadata or not? I don't care, is what I'm saying. I called it Visual Meta. It's maybe not a good name, because what we're trying to do here is we have to reinvent a lot of the language. We have to look at it freshly. And all I'm saying is, here's some useful stuff that talks about other stuff.
Absolutely.
Okay, Fabian, sorry about that.
Well, you won't be sorry, because what I say might make no sense. It's very raw, let's say, but I'm trying to push a bit the idea of always having an executable or some piece of code rather than just text. Because I think, the difference between a description and an action is pretty fundamental. And I'm wondering if that could be really literally the case for every single piece of text. Like there is an executable, maybe one ideally that already exists. Like we don't have to write it; it's already there. We just don't know. So, and I thought about a way now. It's again very, not silly, but definitely not perfect. So you can do embedding where you put a corpus and then you put the text and you refer or you see how they relate one to another. They might not relate at all. Let's say they are at the opposite ends of the spectrum, or they can be next to each other. It's a metaphor, but as far as I know, embedding goes roughly like that. And I'm wondering if we can do this, for example, on a series of pieces of code. So, for example, in GNU Linux, you have a bunch of utils that have been existing since Unix, so since the 70s, even before this, that the cloud runs on, and most pieces of software run on, like cat, grep, sed, all these kind of utilities. They are there in every languages. Basically, you have some equivalent of it. So I think pretty fundamental, but they're executable. What you can do though is that they have a manual, so a textual description of what they're supposed to do, and then you can embed them, like do an embedding on the description, the manual of each of those pieces of code, and then see, and then you can compare, let's say, a piece of text and one of the series of utils, like is one of the piece of text from, let's say, the future of text closer to this utility or that other one, and if none of them is a good match, should combining those two or those three or writing something else do that thing. Why do I say this? Because I don't think it's necessarily just an artistic practice. Let's imagine the conversation we have today about, for example, chat and transcription and annotation with the different speakers and all that wouldn't be just a video that wouldn't just be transcribed, but there would be the piece of text as code directly after the end of the meeting. Just to imagine that we have this discussion and the next we have it on the tool that was very roughly described. I think that would be quite amazing.
So I have a provocation to you then. That is just like I am making this rolling thing. Why don't you do the same? Where you start seeding, you write some pieces with this type of code in it to help us understand. But then also you should be able to write a master document that basically, so to speak, compiles them. Not necessarily as one thing, but you can have it as here is the active or Jupyter Notebook style version of what we have so far.
Yes, sure.
That would be interesting. Thank you.
Overall, I really think most of us here, instead of having the conversation and discuss, like for example, we can hear your keyboard from time to time. We should have little buttons that apply those functions. They say, oh, keep the last minute or the last thing that person said, summarize it, confirm, search code online that either exists or is open source. If it doesn't exist, that's the closest to it, or a library that does newly this, and then runs it like on the fly right now in a sandbox, so it doesn't like delete all your files or something silly like this. But I think having the conversation like this, I want to have, because a conversation as we're having now, but I should have it with my code editor, and the content itself should be the conversation in whatever form. Again, video, transcript, summarized of the transcript of the last minute, and those should be actionable like right there and there.
So what you're saying maybe also is you want to have an AI running that is explicitly attached to this conversation.
AI or not,
Well,
doesn't matter. If it can be AI,
Yeah,
but it doesn't have to.
No, but
Right,
what I'm saying is, like right now, it would be nice, you've said, if just speak, the last minute was important, whether it's high level AI or it's almost a script, doesn't matter. But we should feel that we have a secretary in the room, for lack of better language. Is that maybe what you mean?
I think what he's saying is that, so what Fabian was drawing reference to the way that GNU Linux has the idea that there are a large number of completely independent sort of programs that the operating system is in general kind of composed of. And what that means is that you can intervene on any kind of SIEM, any barrier between aspects of programming, because it's understood that you're always able to build things. It's not merely that it's open source, it's that the composition strategy is that it's something that you have the ability to intervene at various kind of parts of it. So rather than an application being like Photoshop and monolithic, you would actually have a program that is blur. You'd have a program that is invert colors. And that way you can compose an application or in the sense of applying stuff to a number of those things. So if Zoom was not one thing, which was Zoom, but having a video feed, which was an application, the web goes some way towards this, but it's not as far, and you know, entities like Google, I will call them out as ruining it a lot of the time with tools that render the readability, the legibility of those individual components much more reduced or limited to the really specific box that they understand to be relevant for their sort of financial status. But what the general idea is that you have seams to sort of attach different blocks, be they artificial intelligence or a literal button that you have on your desk that you can kind of press in order to do that. So it's a really important component of an instrument is the composability of the aspects of those smaller instruments and making sure that no action that is presented as atomic is too big that you would want to be able to kind of pull it apart yourself. Because one of the things that we've been sort of dancing around more in the past, but more explicitly today, is the ability to be able to kind of pose things within the boundaries of the applications that we're talking about.
Okay, I think it would be really good to see this. And I know that Peter is just nodding until his head will fall off. But this sounds to me a little bit, well, it sounds brilliant, but it also sounds very ephemeral or vague because I don't know that world right now. Maybe Peter before Fabian, if you don't mind, Fabian, since. Okay, yeah, Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a little mini demo. My test bed is coming along very, very nice, and I just wanted to
Hang on,
Sorry,
Peter.
then no.
Peter.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But did Fabian want to say something on this just before?
Yes, it was on this specifically, so sorry to interrupt, but
No problem.
I'm going to let's do a bit of marketing. I like I'm trying to push for the idea of responsive programming, so not responsive design, where the content you see works on every device or platform, but programming, where you can program where you are right now. So why I'm saying this is because this is how I wish Zoom right now was, meaning that we would have those blocks of videos, those video streams, audio streams, and yes, we could apply speech to text on them, we could apply summarization on them, but basically being able to say, right now, this conversation needs new affordances. We need new ways to manipulate the content we're producing. And I've done it since last time. I shared on Twitter, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, how we went from our conversation to a transcript, and I think some summary of it, like the example of PeerTube. But I think what I see here, and with the example of the GNU utils and the composability, indeed, need not wait for the next meeting, or for today it does, but I think for the following one it shouldn't, namely that we should be able to do responsive programming right there on those video streams, on those flux of information, and it should be done by any of us, so that we say, I want the last 5 minutes or 10 minutes, or I want only what Brendel said, and then I want to see if it matches some of the repository I have, but again, not as a description, as something that runs right here and there, AI-based scripting, whatever, it doesn't really matter, but that we should make the live video conversation and its audio affordances for programmability and composable, not just consumption.
Yeah, here, completely agree. No argument from this guy. Peter.
You know,
Oh, sorry, Bentel.
Yeah, Brando.
I was just one way of starting that is to be able to create virtual cameras, for example, so that in the same way that you have people have snap cameras, or I think they might have discontinued that, but it was possible to do for a while. You can have the ability to have that be some kind of application, and it's able to be sort of intervened up between your Zoom instance or whatever else, and has the ability to, for example, record the time code relative to things like words or gestures, be able to take snapshots and things like that. So you'd be able to compose it that way against the interests of most of the agents present within the ecosystem, but it's a really interesting way to start, and as a positive demonstration of what more has the ability to look like. So that's fun to play with. Sorry, that's all.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Peter.
Okay, let me share my screen now.
There we go.
Okay, so this is our live test bed, fully operational now. It's using a JavaScript engine called Dino. And Dino is a new JavaScript runtime where basically the guy who originally developed Node.js thought in retrospect that there were a whole bunch of things he'd like to have done differently. But had he tried to change them now, it would have broken everything in the Node.js ecosystem. So he couldn't do it. So he basically forked the idea and came up with a brand new project from scratch that is Node re-envisioned as he would have built it if he knew then what he knows now. So that's Dino. It has a much faster startup time than Node, and it can also load programs and libraries direct from the web. So in the Node system, you have a Node modules folder in your project, and basically every time you do a new project, you wind up copying a new version of the Node modules folder, and you're downloading half of the internet over and over again for every project, and it's a massive disk hog and caused all kinds of problems as far as that goes. So he figured he'd scrap all of that, and instead he has a single global cache file for downloaded modules, and you can specify what version of the module you want. And you can see right up here, we're importing a bunch of things, and you have the URLs, which are enough for Dino to go out, find the actual code, store a local copy of the code, but you don't need to know about that. And even better, the system can even run a program that's sitting on a remote server direct without having to first download and install it locally. So if you have Dino installed with Brew on your Mac, you can automatically go out to the web and pull in and run and execute anything that's been put out there with a global URL on a file server somewhere. So basically what this program does here, it starts a file watcher monitoring everything that's happening in a workspace file. In order to parameterize that, we have a simple standard environment file. So the only input that this system needs is a value for where your global workspaces folder is going to be. I stuck it on my desktop. You could have in your documents folder or anywhere else. So the workspaces folder is going to be where all of the projects using the test bed are going to be stored. And then the name of the workspace itself, which is going to be the name of the subdirectory in which the currently active project is. Eventually, I'll set it up so that you can change workspaces and it'll scaffold out a new project for the test bed in that workspace. So far, I just have a pre-built one.
Peter, can you just back up a little and remind me of the high-level purpose of this? It seems like a reasonable structure, but I'm afraid
Okay.
the top level goal of it all is sort of
Okay, the top level goal is a domain-specific language development workbench for building grammars to recognize arbitrarily complex hunks of structured text. So we want to be able to process text. We want to be able to work on the grammars that we're going to be using to recognize different kinds of text formats. And
okay, yep. But what does that do?
This lets us build transpilers very quickly on the fly, and I'll show you what kinds of results we can get from it in a minute. So let me just show you here. We have a doc folder. The doc folder is going to have generated documentation because I have a literate programming mindset. When we're processing some input, we're assuming that we're going to be generating a text file with documentation. So
Peter, can I stop you again though? I have no idea what this is in support of. Can you tell me what this is like? What is an ideal execution of this application? Because I have no frame of reference for understanding what this is actually meant to be doing for me.
okay, eventually it will be used to build a new literate programming environment, and eventually it will have a nice user interface so that you won't see this level of it at all. This is basically one level of tooling down in order to build the tooling that I want to build for other projects. So this
What
is
are those projects? Can you tell us about those projects?
those projects are going to be the literate development tool and maybe an alternative to Markdown for building beautifully typeset, richly linked, visual meta, imbued documentation, textbooks, and other forms of written communication.
Okay, so this is for textbooks and legal documents and in legal
It
information?
could be textbooks, legal documents, and programs, software development projects too, because you want people to have the beautifully generated documentation. So for your typeset documentation, you would have the LaTeX system automatically go out and take that input typesetting information that will be generated by the system and turn that into a beautiful PDF. So we're running the LaTeX tool chain behind the scenes automatically for you when something changes that alters the documentation, and all of that will be run behind the scenes. So what you will see as a user of the system is you'll be working on an input document and you will type something, and the system will then go and parse it and generate typeset documentation and also generate some kind of arbitrarily destination output file. At the moment, we're not doing anything. So if A comes in, A is coming out. But
So,
eventually they'll be able to do arbitrary transformations.
So,
So
Peter-
basically it's a tool building toolkit.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
so that's very good timing that Andrea is coming in now. She did say she would be an hour late today, so we're very glad you're here. Because we are now planning to talk a bit about the demo day. So maybe you want to define something you want to further build in this toolkit for the toolkits that you will then work on during demo day.
Okay, so let me just show you a little bit more here. Now, in order to see whether the grammar is doing what I want the grammar to do, I want to be able to look at a whole bunch of alternatives at the same time. So we're using the YAML file format to simply define, we have on our far right pane tests. So the tests are a very simple structure. It's just a dash, name, and what the name of the test is going to be. So we want to recognize the word foo, and given this is what the input file would be, and expect is what we want our transpiler to create on the other side. And then the system automatically will be running each one of those tests against our test grammar. And down here in the lower center is the actual grammar file that defines what the transformations are going to be. So at the moment, it's recognizing the word foo and just putting out foo, but we could instead have it return bar when it sees foo. Okay, so now if we save this, it will then regenerate.
Peter, this is good stuff, but it's a bit internal and abstract for the time being. But
Okay.
It's really good what you've explained, that it is designed to help do transformations.
Because as you edit the grammar, all the tests get run automatically. Then in the far left pane, you see what the result of the test is and whether the test passed or not, based upon what you specified on the right pane.
Yeah, cool.
So anyhow, you get the idea. But basically, it's a tool for a programmer to use when developing the next level of tools, and not something that would be used at an end user level.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Peter.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now, and then we can hear what Andrea has to say.
So Andrea, earlier today, we've been spending quite a lot of the discussion talking about how to deal with the record of our own dialogue, both in written and spoken form. including everything from plain text document into how we can deal with it in augmented environments. So, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, good to see you all. Yes, I think maybe Fabian can start with a really nice outline that he sent to you and I. And
Yes.
yeah, let's see if we can get it to happen. I think Fabian's outline kind of says it all.
Great, thanks. The thing is, I'm on my mobile phone, so if someone else could showcase the great outline.
Yes.
Basically, the idea though was we meet each other from time to time. We start by saying what the whole point is initially to make sure that we are indeed on the same track. We start first by a relaxed coffee for those who can, so that if we have live updates, then we share this, and it doesn't then go on the logistical aspect. Then we discuss about what is the point. Then we work. Then we meet each other, let's say 2 hours later, to say what's the update, and then we do it again at the end of the day. And again, being pragmatic, showing what we have actually done, not what we wish would be done. That's the rough summary of it.
Yeah, and you also had another few nice things that Andre and I both liked, which is no slides is one.
Maybe if one of you two could maybe paste it in the chat so that others
Yes.
could see.
Andrea, do you have it there?
Yes, I do. Pasting it right now.
You're so organized.
Thank you.
Here we go.
I
That
see
may be a bit early, 9 o'clock European time, unless Brandel and Peter are pulling all-nighters, but that's something that can be maybe floated down a bit. Maybe we go a bit more into the evening, us Europeans.
9 a.m. So I mean, I can do that for a day, and it's on a Friday. It's easier because if it blows anything out, it's my weekend. So yeah, I don't object enormously to that.
Okay. Peter's furiously thinking. Right.
Yeah, trying to compute CEST to Eastern Daylight.
I use worldtimebuddy.com, and there's another one that because I have a coworker in London and a coworker in Paris, and so it makes logistics difficult, especially when we try to find anything that is tolerable to talk to some of our other colleagues in Sydney. That's awful.
Absolutely.
Somebody has to suffer, is the thing.
So on the 12th of May, also is the day where I'm meeting with the ACM Digital Library Board, which is very exciting. They're
Okay.
considering implementing Visual Meta across the board. And that means, well, there's two reasons. I think some of you have been updated, but anyway, I like to talk about it, so you're going to have to spend 20 seconds listening, if you don't mind. They did a survey recently of many members, I think it was something like 3,000 members, fully expecting the members to say it's time to move everything to the web. Almost no one said that. Everyone wants PDF documents. They want to have their knowledge items, which suits me well. Let's not even go into the bigger issue. The second thing is their XML, based on all the inputs now, has all the stuff basically that Visual Meta needs. It has all the references are structured, the headings are structured. So it means that if they do take this approach of adding this extra page with stuff, it's not just how to cite the document. People can instantly make citation trees. All of this becomes trivially possible. So the only thing some of the bosses in ACM have said so far is, oh yeah, this is what we're going to do all along. This is completely obvious, nothing new here. We've just been a bit busy. And now they're going to see if they can do it. So there you go. I will have to leave our meeting for whatever time this will be. I don't know yet. Kind of exciting though. And I have a colleague building a Visual Meta parser, so web-based, put a PDF with it, all the data comes out. So we've lost iPhone and Brandel.
I'm not sure if I'm muted. I was just making a well, sandwich is too strong a word. I was putting some butter in some bread.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome. That sounds really cool. So while you're talking, I just got a random idea, maybe related to what you're saying, maybe not. Like I don't know this organization and what they do, but as you were talking, I was like kind of building things in my head. And I got this idea. What if for demo day? So I've been working on some stuff. Fabian has been working on stuff that we would like to share with you. What if we picked a paragraph from a text? I don't know, like Moby Dick or whatever. We can vote on our favorite book. We picked a paragraph, and that would be the basis for all the things being demoed and talked about. I feel like it would just be super interesting to run the same Moby Dick paragraph through all of the systems that we're trying to demo.
How about we use our book, The Future of Text?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it has to be a paragraph that is quite rich in terms of a bunch of stuff. I don't know, like the need for associations, the need for citations, the need for like clicking on some nouns and explaining them, maybe some historical context, whatever. But I think it's critical for the way I'm seeing it, at least for the coherence of demo day. It might be critical in my head for all of us to actually use the same paragraph.
I think that's a great idea, and it doesn't have to be something that's in our book, but maybe we even write a paragraph together to have all those attributes, almost like a dummy, and then we embed that in the book so that it has a place where it is from. It has those characteristics. But Andrea, if you don't mind, this will be the fourth time for Fabian, second for some of the others. Just going to show you what I did this morning, because I think it's very relevant to what you said, plus I desperately need to show it off. Oh yeah, also one other thing that is important. Visual Meta has a concept of deletable appendices. This is from Peter, who was here. He had the idea of errata in a Visual Meta. So you have your normal Visual Meta, there's a change, you put it in a separate one, so then you don't have to change the text. The whole point of mentioning it to you is that also can contain spatial information.
Yeah.
So you take a Visual Meta document in, you do all kinds of VR stuff. When you leave the room, it gets written where everything was. And of course, as we know, that is hugely complicated because of all the different relationships and stuff, but that's a thing. Right. So what I've done here, this is a new document. It's only about 900K. It is a overview of the beginning of Future of Text 1 because it's very manual work. But if you have a look at this table of contents, all it is the names of the people, but I'll now click through to someone. And these are the elements. So here is Christian Bock. The first bit here is the first sentence or paragraph of his article in the book. This bit here is the last paragraph or sentence of his article in the book. The middle bit is an AI-generated list of points. So what I'm trying to do here is to help us make our stuff readable. We got thousands of pages now. No one is ever going to read it. Oh, hang on a second. It's
Yeah.
my mother. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Hej mor. Jag är på Kåkenäs. Va? Det var så. Det husker jeg ikke. Det tror jeg gjerne. Men jeg er i møte nå, så jeg er ikke på Milde, jeg er på Kåkenäs. Vi snakkes. Ha det. Sorry, I'm staying at her house here in Norway, picking her up, so I had to shut with friends. Okay, so the point of this is several. Number one, no one is going to read the whole thing, and Fabian made us do this really interesting exercise a few months ago, well, many months ago now, where we virtually took all the pages of a document on a wall to see if we could have a better overview. Couldn't, because they got too small. So we experimented with lots of iterations. What this represents is the human beginning, where usually people are quite clear and it's not filtered by AI or anything, and the human end. And then you have this stuff in the middle that may be useful. So if you look at the document, it's all exactly the same formatting, right? But here's the cool thing. You see this little number here. I can see you're not looking. You got to look at the
I am.
numbers.
I'm taking notes.
No, I know, but you got to see this particular bit.
All right.
Right. So under Bob Horn in hard brackets, number 23, because this is a citation. So that text here is just the heading of that piece. But anyway, if you now click on the future of text, which is the source document for this bit, it opens up to that page. So the presumption, stated presumption is if you have this rolling journal, you must download all the constituent referred to documents first. So imagine we keep having these sessions and people just download. So when they go through these overviews, they are explicitly linked. So this may, because it's a uniform style, it may also be useful for some further data stuff. These bullet points, by the way, are not legally everything they're saying. It isn't. It depends on space. It's just enough to see if you want to read that person's full piece.
I love it. I think it's wonderful. And this works in, how do I get this?
This is Reader for Mac OS.
Nice.
You're a Mac user, obviously.
I'm not. I'm a developer. I hate Mac. I only have used Android and PCs.
Right. So I don't know actually what happens when you click on the numbers, but I don't think that matters too much in our community because it's structured data, so you should be able to do other things with it. So the reason I'm showing you is, you know, I'm proud of it, and it's been a lot of thinking to get to it, but also the worst thing about text is the way it doesn't suit overviews, right? To read a beautiful sentence in beautiful type is easy. And with the stuff that you and Fabienne are working on, well, also you, Brandel, I think you also, Peter, but it is, how can you get different views of this stuff? And one thing that has become really clear is that a written piece is one thing, a spoken transcript is so awful. Like our conversation today, we spent the last hour and a half talking about how to better transcribe this situation, this meeting, and we'll continue to do that. But on a certain level, why? We should be able to point to it, specific bits in this conversation. But if we really want to have a clear conversation, we probably want to write stuff down. So one thing I would like to beg the whole community is, if something sparks your interest in a session, take a note or take a transcript, do whatever, but write something, even if it's just a page. And then we as a community can try to figure out how to put it into the main thread of our dialogue. And I'll just speak for Fabienne because he's outside. I'll read his note. Not just transcribe, make new affordances. Exactly.
It's really interesting. I might need to go ahead, Andrea.
No, I think it's very beautiful. Like you mentioned, it took a lot of thinking to get to this format and this implementation. And I think it has a minimalism that's really solid. So congrats. I can see the pruning work that it takes to get to this kind of simplicity. I think it's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah, thank you. Because a lot of writing is fluff, isn't it? It's filler. And
it's not that it's
point, no, but at a certain point, you want the filler. But you should
right.
just want to have it.
Yes, and that's kind of the point that I was going to make, is that writing is we sort of pretend that the contents of a book is neutral in terms of what its function is. But if you were to write a short piece of text in order to convince somebody to read the rest, then it would look different to the main body of the text. And one of the things that Matushak sort of goes into in Why Books Don't Work is that a book is a hedge. It's a balance of these different and sometimes competing and conflicting sort of demands and desires. But when you have the ability to transpose things with AI like this, then you have the ability to kind of work back from something that somebody wasn't able to write, which is this sort of this persuasive text of like, or advertising kind of text of like why you should be consuming this next piece of content. That's something that's been sort of top of mind for me, reading this book on predictive coding hypothesis recently, that it is somewhere between sort of pop science and the actual to academic text, and so that it's serving both purposes, and frustrating me with the lack of legibility because of the obligatory sort of citations and additional language, which serve a purpose, just not mine.
The idea of a demo day has been brought so strongly to the forefront regarding exactly this work lately, because when we had our meeting on the 20th and Valentina was there, she didn't say much, but she was really present. She truly gets this stuff. And then we had another session where I went through author and reader with her, and she started doing the really annoying thing of having no financial interest in it, meaning that she was inventing right, left, and center, and I was sweating because it would cost so much money to implement it. So one of the things she wanted is in the document kind of an embedded level hierarchy you could expand and contract, but I don't have the money to build that. So that's why the whole idea of do it manually, have a separate document, but as long as they're linked, which they now are, we get the same functionality, so to speak. So I think the time and resources of a demo day to try to do something useful, as long as we roughly agree on what beforehand, can give us a lot more than $1 million budget, because then what happens when you have too much money? You lose imagination. You don't lose imagination, you lose the need to use what is there, and using what is there makes it cheaper in the long run for everyone, right? So I think that is important. I'm saying that for the transcript. Okay, Fabian.
Two quick things. Number one, I think, yes, having the same shared text is interesting. Yet I would say the same thing as regarding, for example, having code, for example, at the end as an outcome or executable code. I think having the same shared text is good as a target. And yet, for example, if there is no code in that text, and I would need that code, I would allow myself to cheat and say, oh, I put some code in there. So I think having a shared base is valuable, but it should not necessarily limit us.
That's fair enough, but we do have a few days until the day. So why don't you, because you already agreed to give us some example of this executable code in text, give us an example, and we will, maybe all of us or whoever wants to, we write this paragraph and we stick it in a future of text article. This is the starting point. So then when we have done the demo day and refer back, that is what we refer to. So, artificially create this thing.
We can try. I'm a little bit skeptical that we will have the perfect text by then. So I just want to give a little bit of leeway. Again, the difference between the strict rules and leaving it open, because I'm pretty sure as we go and as we together write that perfect text that give all the necessary examples we need, as we do it, we will have new ideas, basically. So
yeah.
And then I want to push back a little bit on the feeler side. I don't think there is feelers. I think there are feelers regarding our own perspectives. And as you know a lot, then you don't need. So it's more like, where is the right entry point for me? Can I remove all the fluff? But for example, if you give me some text about organic chemistry, nothing is a filler to me. In fact, it will be the other way around. So I think the notion of filler is maybe not true. It's more about finding the right entry point for your current knowledge.
Text that's serving someone else's goals.
Provided the author was good enough. But in our community and academia, there is a lot of just filler, which at a certain point is fine. So fair enough. But anyway, Andrea, I'm sure you have something more intelligent to say than that.
Oh no, so just two random thoughts. First, I've been taking some notes, and while this discussion has been going on, I'm quite happy. I just came up with a kind of like the concept for how I'm going to structure my part of the demo day, and it's going to be an alternative to what I believe the metadata and the summary should be about. I may, if you're interested in me going into that now, I can. If not, I don't have to, and we can wait until demo day. So you tell me. And the second thing is, when it comes to the text, how about this? How about, okay, this is what I would like. I would actually like two texts. Okay, I know the plot thickens. two paragraphs. So so the first paragraph I would like to choose, because I really need I need Moby Dick, I need Dostoevsky, like I really need something like, you know, that gets me going, that like inspires me. So I really want that, like, you know, something heavy for me. And then I'm gonna build before demo day in one of my tools this idea of the metadata and the summary and whatever with respect to that one paragraph that I choose. And then I would love if you then, after I show you that, gave me a paragraph which I have never seen before. And then I have to apply the same thing that I just built on my Moby Dick paragraph, but to your paragraph, which I haven't seen before. So it's a way, it's like I'm building something with something in my head, and then I'm checking the assumptions and the flexibility of my system by applying it live to something I've not seen before.
That sounds entirely reasonable, but can you tell me the kinds of what you want? What do you want to show with this paragraph? What kind of interactions or visualizations or whatever?
So the main concept will be to show my understanding of how I would spatialize text and the relationship between the written words in a paragraph, which I still think we should keep in some form, and the spatialized version of them. So there's going to be the written paragraph with letters and English words, and then there's going to be a VR scene with interactive functionality. That's going to be my spatialized version of that. And I'm going to make a bunch of assumptions about what exactly I'm spatializing and why. So one of the things, for example, is this distinction between the first things you encounter and then the many layers behind it, the many layers behind it being stuff like the metadata. And when it comes to that, what I've been writing while you guys were talking is that if I was the master designer of one of the systems, just because of my particular interest, I'm not making any general statements, the kind of summaries that AIs tend to generate now are of zero interest to me, because I have zero interest in what's called facts. The only thing I'm interested in these days is the structure of the argument. I don't care what that article says. I don't care. What I care about is I need to pass a judgment on whether or not the argument introducing the facts is solid or not. And what the AI summary is giving me are the facts, but they're meaningless if I cannot check if they were built on solid logic or not. So I would not summarize something based on the facts. I would summarize something based on the logical structure that's bringing the argument supporting the facts forward. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about right now.
But only the structure as it pertains inside the text. You're not talking about needing information outside the text.
I don't know. I mean, it would start based on the text. Like the text would have to put forward some kind of proposition about something, and it would have to, it has a structure to support that, right? Like, and that's why it's kind of interesting to look at things like academic texts that have a very narrow analytical philosophy, Western frame of mind in how they try to convince you of why their facts are solid or why, you know, what they're putting forward, and then contrast that with a piece of literature where it's not relying on analytical philosophy as a foundation for argumentation, is relying on many, many other types of argumentation, including like embodied memory, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of the problem of doing text. Text is like saying, hey, let's have a discussion on the future of images. You know, it can mean almost anything. But I think those cases make sense. We are primarily, it seems, in the community interested in academic or academic-like text or academic light. I think that's fair enough.
So programming text. I'm very interested in source code itself as an executable text, but that's primarily intended to be understood by other human programmers.
Yeah, literate programming, as you talk about, and Fabian talks about these executables in text. I think that is very, very important. I mean, Vint Cerf in The Future of Text 1, he referred to it as computational text. So I think there is a strong agreement in the community that we would be able to, I mean, my trite example is me writing, on Wednesday, I'm going to have a meeting with Fabian, but highlighting and saying, you know, take into account the day I'm writing this. And once it's past Tuesday, change the sentence to say, on Tuesday, I was planning to have a meeting with Fabian. You know, it's not a very useful example, except for on a web page maybe, but to be able to write things in, such as, you know, the weather was really cold today, in brackets, this is the weather today, again, also a bit trite. But these things are fun to start experimenting with. You know, when do you want live stuff? When do you want relative stuff? When do you want the static original? When do you want insertions, etc.? Yep, iPhone, go ahead.
Yes, just we don't have a meeting on Wednesday, do we?
No.
Okay, cool. Because my iPhone indeed is at less than 10% battery, and as I'm on a holiday, I'm not going to turn it back on, so I'll be back online on Monday. So if you see me disappear, I'm not trying to be impolite, just literally no more juice, and I want to keep it that way for a bit.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So what are we talking about demoing? Andrea, yours will have a full or partial VR component?
It will have a full VR component.
So ideally, those who can should have a headset accessible.
I think you'll probably be working in Unity, so you won't necessarily have.
I can build.
downloadable.
I can build and put it on an Oculus release channel. That's the best I can offer. So if someone has an Oculus 2, I can do it, build, and give you access to that. So it will go to your headset.
Okay, so it won't be web-based. It's not WebXR, so it's not like we just take a URL and there we are. Okay.
Yes, and
But-
I can screen share, yeah. I can
Okay.
screen share from the editor.
Right. Okay, no, that's cool. Also then, one thing that would be nice is if we deal with not necessarily the same data, but we can pass data along. So I would like to at least take, well, I will be taking the results of this and trying to put it into our journal somehow, to different degrees of fidelity. I would be very happy, of course, Andrea, if we record the meeting in a way that you can run your tools in the entire meeting for the arguments, etc., and put that in alongside the plain text. That would be great. Peter, if you by that time will be able to do some of the work that you want your tools to do, of course, this meeting itself would be raw material, plus all the work we've done before. So let me just ask everybody to ask everyone else what everyone else can contribute. You know, I'm a flat guy with my tools, reader and author. Visual Meta is my magic. What can I contribute data-wise for any of you, if anything?
Let me add a piece of information I think would be interesting, connected to what you just said. So the tool I'll be using, actually, I might not even make a special build. I might just give you the access to the build we already have, and then send you the file. So we have this in-house. This is like not public. We have this like in-house thing that we use that is able to make environments, and also then we can exchange files. So it's like a piece of software. If you have it, I can email you the file and then you'll open it on your device. And it also has an export button where it can export all the geometry. So whatever spatial argument we built, one, I can send it to you and you can also go in there. We can meet in there together. Unfortunately, I don't have a back end. We just do P2P networking on it. So that means we cannot all be in it and edit it, but we can each separately edit a scene and then meet. So those could be kind of cool stuff to experiment with. And then the export part, right? So then let's say we end up collectively building an argument. This is another thing we can do. What I do with my team a lot, and we really love it, is we play Exquisite Corpse. So we just keep sending the scene to each other, and everyone keeps, I mean, this is architecture, but everyone just keeps building on top of that scene. And then as a more permanent record that's independent of the actual program, I can export all of that geometry. Well, you can too, as a like FBX. And then that can go into Fabian's world, that can go into a website, that can go into whatever. It won't be editable in the way that it was in the actual initial software. Because basically that entire geometry in the initial software is procedural. So when you press the export button, it will turn it from procedural geometry to FBX meshes. But those FBX meshes will still be the embodiment of that argument that we built during demo day. And they can be, screenshotted and put into all other kinds of environments in a dead form.
Just looking up on my phone here on the meshes you're talking about. I did some scans in Japan. Let me just see if I can. Yeah, FBX, did you say, or FPX?
BX,
B.
FBX.
Okay.
It's short for film box, but nobody knows that.
Ah, okay.
Oh,
Yeah, and it's just a fun little consumer thing with the iPhone 14. These are some street fronts. And I know I'm going a bit off topic, but it's just crazy that a telephone can do this now. Whatever. FBX,
Yeah,
great.
no.
But this
I-
is relevant what you just showed, right? Because demo
Yeah.
day, we could build a spatial structure of the paragraph. And then you can open that FBX later on your phone. So that's
have,
going into the direction of metadata text, spatializing it on existing accessible devices.
Having gone through the process of doing this kind of summarization on the document on our first book, finally, I can see that some people are talking about the same things. As a human, I didn't feel that it was my judgment to do that. But one thing we should probably do at some point over these articles is just extract keywords per article. Maybe a little bit of semantic analysis, because a lot of people are talking about the importance of text, and then people are talking about the limitations of text. And it's like, okay, I get it, but in a properly visualized, spatialized environment, these things are beginning to become neutral, to have, even if it's in the form of a bookshelf, how it's organized. Because one of the annoying things about the document that I just built, this rolling journal, it goes through it linearly. So you're going to see me first, because I wrote the introduction, and then it's Vint, and then it's alphabetical. That's such a limited way of having the initial option to traverse the thing. Peter.
I was wondering, Andrea, are there any architectural tools that use an interactive read, evaluate, print loop where you could be giving language-based directives to the system to build and add additional constraints that would control an evolving visualization? Sort of like the old Blockworld AI demos from way, way, way back in the pre-AI winter days, so that I could say, give me a blue cube, give me a green cube, put the blue cube on top of the green cube, and ask system some questions. Does a sphere intersect the cube? Make one thing twice as big as another thing? Put it behind something, so that you could give language prompts basically that would be controlling the constraints that are applied to generate a model that would then be visualized for you on the fly.
So the traditional architecture software that we've had since the 80s is command line based, or like you type in what you want, you type in commands. So AutoCAD, which has since been replaced by other things, and still what's the main 3D modeling software for a lot of architects, called Rhino. You type in commands and you have parameters and you type in stuff. Younger people hate it because they're used on clicking on buttons, but older people like myself love it because we have memorized all the commands and all the sub commands and everything. So we are just like talking. We're basically like, so, but you literally type in like C for cube, enter, D for diameter, enter, 3 for 3 meters, enter, and then you just keep manipulating the cube or whatever you want to build just by typing on a keyboard. So this has existed since the 80s. And currently there are a bunch of startups trying to do this through AI. And there's like a longer discussion about, you know, what's the difference between you actually knowing the commands and doing it the way we've been doing it since the 80s versus doing it with an AI. Given the demos I'm seeing, the only thing seems to be that younger people just have not memorized the commands. So the AI is kind of the intermediate between that. But yeah, that's kind of what's going on.
Well, I would also add that there's Grasshopper on top of Rhino, and Grasshopper is intensely constraint driven. So in terms of having rich constraints that can be dynamically updated for dizzyingly parametric sort of systems, most of that, as I understand it, goes through Grasshopper on top of Rhino. But as far as I'm aware, to Andrea's point, there's not a great deal of dialogic sort of plain language kind of exposition of those relationships. It's something that's either command line driven or point and click in order to establish those constraints.
I mean, actually, maybe at some point we have another one of these calls and we go into this, because I feel like a lot of this is very relevant for your concerns, which means like text input, how architects since the 80s, we've been using dialoguing and text input to control geometry. And the second thing was Brandel has just mentioned is visual parameters to control geometry, which is the Grasshopper. So all of these things have strong parallels with other text discussions.
I'm not sure about the assertions about younger people not doing commands and needing buttons. I think it's more that more of society now is interacting with devices. You know, so this tool here is my Liquid tool that I made many years ago. It's still one of my top downloads, and you have to do keyboard shortcut. First of all, select text anywhere, and then keyboard shortcut to take that text into your interface. So it means that you can look up any reference or any search within half a second. And I know that it is being used by people because if something breaks in a build, I get an email immediately. So that's really nice, you know, so we fix it. But look at this. It now has the AI built into it. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
It's just crazy how easy it is for a developer like me to use OpenAI because people use their own API keys. So I don't have to worry about any billing or anything like that. All we do, ask AI, you know, they can make their own prompts, all of that. They just type in their OpenAI key. There we go.
What is this? I've not seen that before since I don't have a Mac. Is that a standard Mac thing with the way that thing flipped?
No, that's
What is
No,
that?
that's a very exciting exotic Frode thing.
yeah. This is my thing. So you know, let me just. Yeah. So this thing here is what's called Liquid, and it is a complete ripoff of Doug Engelbart, but I didn't know it at the time, because in NLS, you know, you type in a command at the top of the screen. But if you get to a point where you forget what commands you can type, you hit the question mark key and the full screen shows you all your options. So this is exactly that, but it's the opposite. So when you hit enter and you do S for search, then you do G for Google, it does a Google search on this. So it means you can do something really quickly. Like if I want to look something up on Wikipedia, okay, that one was rubbish. Let's do the word implicit. That's how quick it is. because I do launch, references are W Wikipedia. So with the AI stuff, A summary, AS. And this flippy thing, that's just to get to the back to have where all the settings are at, because you can make your own searches, references, and so on. We had it in the beginning, and then Apple made it really hard to maintain, but we managed to keep going because I just think it's so cool. The idea
so
of the back
wonderful.
of a document.
The other thing that, I mean, okay, this is kind of my wish list. I don't have time for any of this, but I just dumped my wish list on you. So the first wish list was that thing with the CAD and like the commands, and it's very much what you're talking about, Frode. I think you would really love to see how we've been doing it in architecture since the 80s. And I think the UX component is so powerful and wonderful. The commands that we use are even divided into action verbs and objects. So when I want to generate objects, there's like a certain, like a nouns basically, right, of the object, and then certain manipulations that come with that. But then, and then there's an entire list of actions like trim, intersect, fillet, and so on. So when you are building your 3D world just with these commands, it's very interesting how in your head it feels like dialoguing, and this flipping between objects and actions.
Okay, thank you. Now that Fabienne is gone, I get it. So one thing that would be amazing is you have two different articles and you can say, what do they have in common? What's the intersection? Where do they differ? Etc., right? So it's like geometry that just happens to be articles.
No, it's like writing. It's like the way you're writing a text, you're bringing up nouns, verbs, whatever. I'm writing my building, but I'm still using the grammar.
Oh, I understand. And that's fantastic. What I'm saying is in the context of what we're doing together, and when you're talking about, you want to have the arguments, you want to have the different, either, when I say article, by the way, that could be a written article or it could be just what Peter said earlier in this conversation, that chunk of text. You want to be able to have it analyzed to the point where you can say, what is the intersection between what Brandel and Peter was talking about? Potentially, right? Or not?
Maybe. Maybe not.
Okay. So this is just a tangent. That's absolutely fine.
And let me just put out there really quickly. I promise my other thing on my wish list. I really feel like it would be fascinating for me to have a conversation in exactly this context about how people like just the wide variety in how people process text in their heads. I feel like whenever I hear you speak, for example, I feel like you process text in a fundamentally different way than me. I basically do not register words and letters. Everything gets instantaneously turned into a spatialized image in an area. Like the inside of my brain is literally an area. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, even what you just demoed, that doesn't even fit into my brain structure. And I feel like we're operating on these assumptions that everyone is kind of on the same page at the brain processing level. And the truth is that we're not.
I like your fun pun. We're all on the same page. That's important. Yeah, that's a hugely important point. And yeah, absolutely something to discuss. One thing, we've had one special session on building thoughtful dialogue. We've had one on AI and academia with text. I think we should also have one on text and virtual architecture as a special topic. But of course, we can always have version 2 of these. The one about the brains and the different ways of viewing this is very, very fascinating. If you want to, we can invite people to a special topic on that and have lightning talks where people who want to will spend a minute or two trying to explain how they view text. That would be fantastic.
I've had this conversation with only one
Sorry,
person. Yeah.
for the transcript, that's important. Okay, go on.
I've only had this conversation with a single person, my cousin in my life a few years ago, and it was like one of the most fascinating conversations I've ever had. And I've been looking ever since at replicating it, but I can't find the right people. And it was very simple. It was basically just asking another human being, when you read the word, whatever, chair, what happens in your brain? Like, what do you see? Like, are you able to exercise introspection to the point where you can like explain to someone else what happens? And it took us some time, right? It takes some time to like get it going because it's just not an exercise we usually do. But what came out after about 20 minutes of like, was the most fascinating stuff ever, to the point where I wish it's like, oh, heck, if someone had asked me when I was in kindergarten what I see when I read the word or so, or like how I process stuff internally, my life might have turned out differently.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's organize a session on that and do exactly that. We should probably have it guided, like you ask a question like that, everybody writes, even in a Google Doc, whatever, or writes and then pastes at the end, put it in. I think that's very, very useful. You know, I have this boy who's going to be 6 next week, and his brain is clearly different from mine. Maybe it's age, maybe it's personality, but to see how he reasons and looks at things. So of course, a parent is always interested in the child intellectually like this, but to look at each other, I think is also very beneficial. I can see Peter's hand.
Yes, I was wondering, is there any place that I could see a simple transcript of an architect interacting with one of those systems, you know, like build a simple plotting shed or something, so I could see what the actual grammar looks like, and then maybe try to get my tools to be able to directly deal with that language and
The
build
tools
things
from
with that.
the tools we've had from the 80s, or the new AI stuff people are working on?
Well, when you talk to your system and design a building, not so much the newer AI stuff. I'm more interested in hardcore parsing than the neural net approaches. So I've always been a symbolic AI man myself. And it was very frustrating to me when the AI winter came, and then all of that round of technology got abandoned and everybody ran off to just do neural computing for the rest of time. And that's where all the money went. And suddenly all of the promising lines of symbolic computing withered on the vine. And of course, part of that was because the computing hardware that was available at the time was pretty much hitting its limits. But with today's hardware, to use those earlier techniques, there's a lot of potential that I see. And of course, there's also some very interesting computational linguistics work that could get integrated into that. But it would be really helpful to see some sample hunks of what those kinds of dialogues look like, so that I could try to induce some grammars out of that, and see if we could build some more modern tools, maybe drive A-frame with text through an interactive web dialogue.
I wrote in chat my suggestion for things you can search on YouTube. So if you search for these kind of tutorials, you'll get millions of hours of architects walking you step by step through how they make a building in this way.
Oh, very good. Thanks so much for the pointer.
Right, so we're running up. Oh, we've crossed over time a little bit. So the thing is, Andrea, you said a minute ago you haven't found the right people to do this particular exercise with. And I think I am so grateful for you guys in this community to have such a wide view, but such a shared commitment to trying to understand things. And at the end of the day, I feel very privileged to know you guys, but I also feel a huge commitment to share what we learn together and what we learn from each other. So that's why the record is such an important thing. So I think that on our demo day, we should be really cognizant of the of what are the many, many trains of thought. Dave Millard, one of my 2 advisors, he was talking about apparently there's 7 types of hypertext the other day, as opposed to 7 types of issues. And he said that the two issues that seem to be important in my work, and I think also in all of our work, is hypertext for communicating, as in you put together a web page or whatever it might be, and then there's hypertext for thinking. You know, these are absolutely not the same things. So I think that we're working a lot on the tools for thought, to use that phrase, in our community. But if we can manage to hook it up to the presentation aspect and do it in a robust way, and by robust, I mean, of course, visual meta, because it's for the long haul, but also robust for now. You know, these VR things are really, really important. You know, so to find ways that people can read about it and actually enter it. Because it is like, I'm very grateful for the words you said about the rolling journal that I showed you, even though it's very different from your mindset. Because the only way I could make that is by having made complete rubbish before, right? So the whole act of doing these demos is just, you know, very grateful. But anyway, final point, let's find ways to get these things out there in the world that is readable and understandable and not just 2-hour video clips.
We're an independent think tank. This is the decade-long conceptual work no company will pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I know you're saying that on many levels, but the transcript for 2 of the recent special presentations, you know, I paid a couple $100 for those because my brain cannot do details. And I'm saying part of it, I don't mind living up to the obligation of paying for some things, but it's not sustainable in the long term. So the processes and procedures that we're building here, I think, are really important for us and for others, because it is quite crazy how bad the infrastructure is for having an argument either live or asynchronously with document, and then having someone go back and look at it. You would think it would be humanity's top goal, but because it is such a shared goal, it becomes a nobody issue. So yes, I agree with your take on that. And also another thing, before I let you go, not that you can't disconnect if you don't want to, but I have, oh, sorry, moving the interface for Zoom. On the future of text websites, currently it's very me for 2 reasons. One is I'm trying to get some work with it, so it's almost my portfolio. But also, of course, I so greatly value you as a community, all of you, and having gone back and forth over the years with, you know, people coming in and then either feeling not appreciated or, hang on, why are you writing me as such a person? I'm not that involved. You know, having that tension because it's not a real organization, so to speak. If you want to have a look at the Future of Text website, and if you feel that you want to be written more in, tell me, and I will very, very happily do so. Currently, you have all started being listed on the Future Text Lab. Just log in there. Of course, it won't just let me get the front page. So this is kind of the community here. So if you have thoughts on this, do tell me. Let's not get to a point of disagreeing on things. Andrea, I don't think you have listed yourself, but if you want to be on here, I'd be super happy. Send me a brief bio. I'll make you a web page, sorry, a post, and then I'll just tag it as team. So that's the never-ending story of when people do things out of passion, how to share responsibilities. I was in Croatia maybe 10 years ago with some Californian type people, let's save the world. We were there for a week. It was really lovely. But because it was all so socially responsible, nobody took charge on anything and nothing got done. So that's a key thing.
I'm sure you've thought about this many times, so but stupid question. But is there a way to actually make this some kind of research tank or foundation, and even ask, I don't know, us to donate on Patreon $5 or whatever, or even having some kind of board that's trying to get donations or something? Having interns, I just can think of a lot of people especially from graphic design, but other fields as well, that would be interested to do internships for the summer months. I know that implies a level of organization that you might just not be up for. But I think the people who recognize the importance of this are not many, but they do exist.
I agree with you. And now for the recording, sorry, recording, I'm gonna have to pause you.